I think it's fair to say that the 2015 season for the Philadelphia Eagles was not a good one. It might have been one of the worst and most disappointing seasons in franchise history, even if the final record doesn't show it. After making it to the playoffs in 2013 and finishing with 10 wins in 2014, expectations were high for Philly entering the 2015 season in year 3 of the Chip Kelly regime, where his high-tempo offense was taking the league by storm and seemed unstoppable at times. The Eagles were one of the favorites going into the season to win the Super Bowl, and with former first overall pick Sam Bradford quarterbacking them, after the shocking trade made on the first day of free agency that sent Nick Foles to the Rams, and with a huge free agent acquisition in DeMarco Murray from the Dallas Cowboys, as in the man who led the NFL in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns the year before, it seemed like the Eagles were going to be one of the teams to beat in the NFL and in the NFC that season. Instead, it was anything but that, as Chip Kelly's hubris caught up to him. After Kelly overhauled a good portion of the roster with some wild trades, many of which didn't work out, including the controversial LaShawn McCoy trade for Kiko Alonso, this was the year that it was clear that the Chip Kelly experiment was over and was a disastrous failure. The Eagles finished the year 7-9. They had no defense to speak of, and Kelly was let go before the season was even over, with the Eagles having not spent a single day during that season above 500. It was a disastrous season in so many ways, and it was clear that Howie Roseman was going to have his work cut out for him to overhaul a roster that Kelly changed and gutted to no avail. And while this season for the Eagles was a train wreck, the schedule did them no favors, because the Eagles started the season having to play 3 of their first 4 games on the road. For some perspective, since going to a 32-team, even division format in 2002 with the arrival of the Houston Texans, and since the Eagles moved into their new venue of Lincoln Financial Field in 2003, the Eagles had never done that before. Usually, the NFL tried to make it as fair as possible, and would schedule the Eagles twice at home in the first 4 weeks, and twice on the road in the first 4 weeks. Yet, in 2015, they did not do that, which raises the question, why was this the case? Did the NFL have it out for the Eagles? Well, amazingly enough, it had to do with an unlikely source, and maybe the only entity in the United States that is bigger than the National Football League. It had to do with none other than Pope Francis, and now feels like as good of a time as ever to talk about how Pope Francis changed the course of the 2015 season and forced the Eagles to have a super road-heavy campaign to start the year off. Because this is the story behind Pope Francis and his bizarre impact on the National Football League. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is the place for you as we try and grow this football community even more. Thanks in advance for your support, and with that in mind, let's talk about the time that Pope Francis did anything but bless the Eagles. Before I talk about what exactly Pope Francis did, we need some context to understand this game right here. It's September 27, 2015. It's week 3 of the NFL season, and we find ourselves at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey for this interconference battle between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Jets. At the time, the Eagles had never lost a game before against the Jets in franchise history, which seems insane to think about, seeing as the Eagles and Jets had played each other quite a few times since such a matchup became possible in 1970. And the Eagles were not about to lose this one, as you can tell from these highlights, as despite starting the season off 0-2, the Eagles were able to bounce back and get their first win of the season, taking this one by a final score of 24-17 and handing the Jets their first loss of the year. Ryan Matthews, the former first-round pick by the San Diego Chargers, had a solid day on the ground for Philly, as he had over 100 yards rushing and found the end zone. And the Eagles' defense, which was largely bad for most of the season, actually looked pretty sharp on this day, holding the Jets to under 3 yards a carry and forcing 4 turnovers. Even if one of the turnovers I wouldn't really call forced, so much as it was Brandon Marshall trying to lateral the ball in one of the dumbest plays by any player of all time. And I do not say that lightly. It's a blooper that still lives on to this day. And if you remember this game, it's probably for that play. Philly got off to a great start, leading 24-0 in the second quarter. And even though the offense stalled in the second half, getting no points and just 64 yards on their final 9 drives of the contest, the defense did its job and forced 3 second-half interceptions to give Philly the win. However, one of the big controversies from this game happened to be with its scheduling. Obviously, the Eagles were always supposed to play the Jets at MetLife Stadium, as per the rotation established back in 2002 when the NFL switched its scheduling format. But why this game in Week 3? This would give the Eagles just one home game over the first 4 weeks of the season, which seems kind of unfair to a lot of parties. It's unfair to the fans, because now they're subjected to more bad weather games. And if the team is bad, you have fewer games that you'll be able to go to at home that actually means something. It's unfair to the players, because that's a lot of travel, especially seeing as the Eagles had already played on a short week before due to playing the Atlanta Falcons on the road on Monday Night Football. And it goes against everything that the league has done over the years, since again, the Eagles had never played 3 home games over the first 4 weeks of the season since moving to Lincoln Financial Field. It's not the end of the world by any means, but it is bizarre to say the least, and seems like something that the schedule maker should have considered. There didn't seem to be a reason why the Eagles had to be on the road in Week 3, just looking at it. It made sense for them to be on the road in Week 1 and Week 4. Lincoln Financial Field shares its parking lot with Citizens Bank Park, home of the Philadelphia Phillies. And while it's not impossible to have events taking place simultaneously at both ballparks, as it has happened before, it's not ideal, and it would be a traffic and a parking nightmare. In Week 1, the Phillies were at home, taking on the Chicago Cubs that Sunday. And in Week 4, the Phillies were also at home, taking on the Miami Marlins in their season finale. So nothing you could do about that. They had to be on the road Weeks 1 and 4. But why Week 3 on the road? Especially if the Phillies were on the road that week and there was nothing going on in the sports complex. Well, that's because of this man right here. None other than Pope Francis. Anytime the Pope comes to the United States, it is a huge deal, especially since Christianity is the #1 religion in the country, and has been since the country's inception, and because it's a really rare event. Even though Christianity's popularity in the United States has declined over the years, Christianity is still a huge deal. Many businesses have off during Christmas and Easter and a lot of other holidays, and Christianity has impacted the National Football League before. There was outcry in 1971 when the NFL played playoff games on Christmas, to the point where the outcry was so large that the league refused to play on the holiday again for another 18 years. Infamously, in 1978, a Mass conducted by the Pope was televised during Sunday's slate of games, and the Mass, which ran long, caused people across the country to miss the entire first half of the action across the early slate. And today, roughly 65% of Americans are Christians in some capacity. So this is all to say that the Pope is an iconic figure, and outside of the President of the United States, might be the most recognizable person in the country. And in 2015, Pope Francis, who became Pope in 2013, was set to make his first and what would eventually be his only visit to the United States. Only once since the turn of the millennium had the Pope visited the country, and that was in 2008, when Pope Benedict XVI made the journey. When the Pope visits the country and comes to your city to hold a Mass, bless people, and hold meetings, it is a big deal where many people attend and lots of security is needed. And this visit to the United States and the Northeast was a big one, with Philadelphia being one of the stops on the week-long visit, as on September 26th and September 27th, as in Week 3 of the NFL season, Pope Francis was going to be in the City of Brotherly Love, concluding his tour of the United States. How many people attended this Sunday Mass that Pope Francis was holding? Let's just say that it was a lot of people, as 860,000 people lined the streets to hear Pope Francis speak. As high as that number sounds, it could have been a lot higher, as there were some estimates that it would have climbed as high as 7 figures. In other words, this Mass drew about 11 or 12 times the size of an average Eagles game. When you have an event happening on Sunday that's going to get roughly 1 million people attending, you need all hands on deck. And safe to say, Even if the visit was happening nowhere near Lincoln Financial Field, due to the link being in the sports district and surrounded by other stadiums and parking lots, you couldn't have 70,000 people attend a football game, have heavy security for that, and still have heavy security for a million people congregation where the whole world is watching. So, with that in mind, 1 year in advance, Philadelphia Archbishop Charles J. Chaput begged the NFL to not have any events in Philadelphia during Week 3. Even though the NFL usually didn't accommodate other events being held in a city unless it had a direct conflict with the stadium itself, like not being able to use the parking lots due to the Major League Baseball team playing at the same time, and concerts in the actual stadium that would prevent a game from being played, this was a little bit different. Even though the link was not involved, it would be too much of a security risk and would be way too chaotic around the city to have this take place. And to be fair to Archbishop Chaput, this wasn't a last-minute thing. It's not as though he requested this a day before the schedule was set to come out. He requested this over a year in advance. He knew his stuff. On July 8, 2014, a whopping 14 and a half months before Pope Francis was set to come to Philadelphia, Chaput recognized that this would be a problem and wrote to the NFL to not schedule anything in Philadelphia that day. Have the Eagles on the road. Granted, I'm not sure how much Chaput knew about football, seeing as when he wrote Commissioner Roger Goodell, he misspelled his name, spelling it with a D, like Aaron Rodgers. But he knew enough about the league's popularity that this would be an issue if you had two events taking place at the same time. Plus, it would be a really bad look for the country and for Christianity if you had fewer people attending this mass because they were watching a football game. And fortunately for Chaput and for all parties involved, the NFL complied. They let Chaput know in October of 2014, 1 year before the event, that even though they had no idea what the schedule would look like for the season for obvious reasons, since the opponents hadn't been decided in some cases, that the Eagles would not be playing that week at Lincoln Financial Field. Even though the NFL had a huge influence over the country and had taken over Christianity in many aspects, including more frequent games on Christmas Day, they weren't taking any chances with this one, even though the stadium would have been available with the Phillies out of town. And with that, and with Pope Francis visiting Philly, we got the Eagles playing the Jets on the road in Week 3, and playing 3 road games in the first 4 weeks for the first time in over a decade, and for the first time since the new scheduling format came out. This wasn't about the NFL trying to screw the Eagles over, or about the NFL making a massive oversight by giving the Eagles a super road-heavy schedule to start the year off. This was a necessity due to other conflicts in the area, and conflicts that even the NFL themselves, as big as they were, could not possibly avoid. It is odd that the one game that the Eagles actually won over the first 4 weeks of the season, in their brutal stretch to start the year off, was the game that had to be played elsewhere due to the visit of Pope Francis. We don't know who the next Pope is going to be, and we don't know if and when that Pope would go to the United States, or what cities they would go to. I'm assuming that the Pope will, seeing as each of the last 3 popes have made the journey at some point. But whenever that visit comes, by whoever it may be, if it happens during the fall, it's going to have some sort of impact on the NFL schedule and how the games are played. Don't believe me? Ask the Philadelphia Eagles in 2015, who spent life on the road early on because of Pope Francis and his visit to the United States. Because in 2015, the only thing bigger than the disappointment that the Eagles suffered was the crowd that the Pope drew in the city of brotherly love that Sunday. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.